Hello and welcome to another edition of Conversation Oasis. This is a weekly free-flow conversation program which comes to you from the Kasviskeidas restaurant here in the centre of Turku. I'm your host today, David Mawby, welcoming you to the program. And with us we have three guests. I think there'll be no strangers today because we have a junior researcher from Åbo Academy and journalist Nana Blomqvist, who's known to you all as one of the hosts here. We have Branko, who is a student of philosophy from Åbo Academy, and of course we have our regular here who makes it all possible by opening his doors to us, Jalal, originally from Iran but citizen extraordinaire here in Turku. So let's get underway. Today we're going to talk about two things, I believe. I think we could express our views on all these cases of sexual harassment that have hit the headlines. The whole house of cards seems to be tumbling down. I've waited a few weeks, 2 weeks to say that. Poor Kevin Spacey, yes, and all his victims as well. I'd like to know, is there anyone here who could say "Me Too"?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, fire away. And by Me Too, I think I should explain that on Facebook there has been this campaign that you surely know about, that if you've suffered at the hands of somebody else, no joke intended, and isn't this a difficult subject, especially if you're born in the United Kingdom, who has suffered from sexual harassment, you've been asked to say Me Too on Facebook.
Yep. And yeah, what should I say? I feel obliged to open the conversation because I'm the only woman in the studio again. Mm-hmm. But actually, I have not been that concerned of the experiences I've had now for some time. I mean, when I start thinking about them, there's a lot, and of course, there's the discussion of the severity of the assaults and harassments, which, I mean, if we say sexual assault or if we say harassment, it can be quite different things. But I mean, for example, I would say one of the experiences that I remember as a very early one was that I more or less got like a rape threat when I was 9, or jokingly. It was a 13-year-old boy who was joking a little bit with me about "let's make you bleed tonight." Yeah, so with these words from translated from Swedish. But so that was I was 9. So that's where it's kind of started for me, I would say. And then of course, ever since the same age, basically, girls are called whores in the school. And yeah, and then from there on, it continues into other stuff.
Well, those are very clear cases of sexual harassment, but when we talk about sexual harassment, there is always a difficulty to make a definition of this concept, or what is it really sexual harassment. Recently, I was just talking to you, Nana, a few days ago. If somebody asks you, you are in a group of people and they are men and they ask you, let's go to sauna together. Is that sexual harassment? If two boys ask you, let's go to sauna together, is that sexual harassment?
In other words, are there cultural matters that should be included in the interpretation of what is sexual harassment? We all know that in Finland, men and women do sit down often naked with each other in the saunas. Families do it, and also I think, if I'm not mistaken, groups of people are public saunas and so on. But really in public saunas, of course, there is a...
Public saunas usually have a bathing suit if it's mixed gender.
Yeah.
But if it's not mixed gender, people usually... And then there might be some turns that are mixed gender naked. But I would say more it's about who is asking, not the cultural thing is not the most important thing here. I think it's if it's your boss asking you, let's go to sauna, then it's probably, I would say it's sexual harassment. But if it's a friend, then you can say fuck off if you're not comfortable. But if it's your boss, it's sexual harassment, I would say.
I have one question. If we believe in equality between women and men, and we are all both human.
Yeah, but we are not equal in a working place, for example.
Well, if he asks his colleague or his worker who's a man, let's go to sauna, that man worker doesn't think that there is something fishy about that. So, but still, if the worker is a woman, because there is feminism here, that element in there, she thinks there is something.
So are you blaming feminism now for...
Not feminism, not. I say that if we believe in equality, we shouldn't think of, as long as something really happening or there is a real strong request. But if it's just a question, we shouldn't consider it as there is a will behind it.
Yeah, if it's only a question, but the thing is, things get meanings in different contexts. So if it's a boss suggesting to his employees, let's go to sauna, in that power position, you can't just say the same things as you say to an equal in the hierarchy. I mean, you can of course, I mean, then you would probably be sensitive enough that everyone would have their bathing suits, for example, or have their towels, you know, so that it wouldn't be sexually loaded, or it would not also, I mean, because it's not good either that it becomes a male club, that only the guys go to the sauna and all the decisions are made in the sauna. That's also like one thing, but that's outside the sexual harassment theme, but it's kind of different sides of patriarchy. So, you know, a boss has to take responsibility for his power. He can't just be, oh yeah, let's go to the sauna. You know, he has to bear the responsibility that comes with the power.
I go along with you, Nana, on this, and I think you're absolutely right. When you're in a situation like that where your boss, a male boss, asks you as a woman to come to the sauna, there is, I think, de facto some kind of sexual leaning in that, and I think it's bad. Of course, if it's a communal thing, maybe it's in a very open working place, fair enough, because I think when we look at the Weinstein cases in America, it's quite clear that this man forced his will upon all these famous actresses, that made it clear to them that if they didn't come to bed with him or go to wherever with him, he would make their life very difficult. To quote the old phrase, "You'll never work in this town before," which I've heard a couple of times in my own career. So I go along with you here.
David,
but I'm not. But to come back to you, Jalal, to what you're saying, there are two sides to the coin as well. It can happen the other way around.
When you're talking about a boss, it's like a traditional being boss. It means that what you're talking about, it means that a boss never can create a friendly atmosphere at work.
Oh, he can do that, but he doesn't necessarily have to ask you to take your clothes off and come into a sauna.
When somebody is when somebody suggests you, let's go to sauna, or let's go, I don't know, for riding a bike, or I don't know, a dinner together. I ask my colleague, who is a man, let's go home to have a drink, let's say like that. He never thinks that there is a sexual harassment or sexual desire behind this question. But if there is a woman, she probably feels there is a sexual desire for this man, for
possibly.
the boss.
But there's also benefits involved when a boss, I mean, if he asks a man, it might be the man is kind of selected among the employees to kind of be favored. You know, if it's a woman, there might be this sexual aspect to it, but still it's not, when you have power, it's not the same thing. I mean, it's just to take into consideration that you can't just go around with power and do the same things as when you don't have that power.
And a good boss should be neutral as well in the workplace, and should say, well, let's all get together and have a gathering, rather than to select individuals.
Yes.
Now, on a day-to-day basis in the working place, if someone's due for promotion, that is done on a one-to-one basis. But if you want to create a good atmosphere in the working place, as a manager, as a boss, you have to be balanced with all your punch. You say, hey, look, we're going to, next Friday, in 2 weeks' time, Friday, let's have a get-together, a casual get-together, and there'll be a few drinks. But it's open doors for everyone, and not just for a select few or just a single individual. I think that's wrong. I'd like to bring in Branko on this because, Nana, you started off with rather a graphic example, and please forgive me if I say that you are of a similar age, but from similar backgrounds as well. What has been your experience with this? I mean, you were in the schoolyard as well.
Well, to begin with, context matters in every situation, and things mean differently regardless of what we are speaking about. So, I mean, if, for example, a friend asks me for dinner as such, like Nana said, like if a friend will ask me for dinner, it's a very different thing than a boss does it, or if a random person does it. So you have to take context into account when you talk about anything, things mean differently in different contexts. But the other thing is this, the problem that I have had with other men often, or people in general, but this not all men attitude, which I always hated, because I don't understand it. It's because I think you have to be able to criticize certain tendencies that in this typical male culture, if you want to call it, certain horrible tendencies in culture in general, you have to be able to criticize them and call it like a male tendency, call it for what it is. And that doesn't mean that you have to. It's like you have to be, förolämpad.
Insulted.
It's weird thing where people get insulted because it's like this attitude where I'm a man and you criticize men, so you must criticize me. You criticize a tendency in men in general. You don't criticize the person, but people still feel this.
They take it personally, like
That's,
like how can you criticize my position?
Yeah,
like very kind of self-absorbed.
I wonder where I've heard all this before. Yeah, do carry on, folks.
but it's very, very childish behavior, and you see it all the time. That people the first thing that they think you are criticizing them personally, and then they attack you on that, or they get insulted because it's for example, which you also see, you criticize Mac company, and a person has a Mac computer, then they get insulted. That I have also seen that. And
yes, me too.
And or PlayStation versus Xbox, people get insulted because you criticize Microsoft, and that's so weird because just the first thing that they kind of I relate to this. I have this object. I am a man, or I somehow the first thing that
emotional possessiveness. Yes. Yeah, I think that's it, and even be a simple thing as what telephone operator you have. But if we come back down to the nitty-gritty of this, there's one point I want to raise. Is it, which these examples that we've seen, these high-profile examples in the media, Weinstein and his molestation of so many women. In the past, 5 years ago, there was this huge scandal in Britain concerning the DJ Jimmy Savile and his attacks on innocent children. I often wonder, is it? And I think the British example shows that it comes from both sides, also from men, not only in a heterosexual context, but also in a homosexual gay context as well.
Can I say something about this?
Go right ahead.
Since I graduated from gender studies, we have of course studied this, but what I want to say, like,
Get us onto the straight and narrow path again, please, Nana.
Okay.
There is this idea or a theory or whatever, like observations about the male sexuality as an aggressive sexuality, in the way that it also is shown in the gay communities, in the sense that in heterosexual relations or male sexuality in general is kind of constructed and cultivated as very aggressive, and that's why kind of newcomers in the gay scene might be quite intimidated, because that aggressiveness is very prevalent there.
Yes.
And yeah, so
absolutely. I can recall several incidents where I was in a gay bar, and I was approached by someone who, well, on one occasion I was approached by someone who tried to say that he'd been trying to contact me for several months, and I'd ignored him. I didn't know what he was talking about, and then he proceeded to grab my buttocks and say how wonderful I was. And immediately he grabbed my buttocks, I realised he wasn't wonderful at all, and I told him to go away. He didn't go away the first time, and he grabbed my buttocks again, and I said, next time you do that, and I'll let the listener understand what I said after that. So yes, it is aggressive. On the other hand, when I say me too, I was also approached, because I wasn't born in Finland, although I'm a Finnish citizen. I always like to remind you of that fact, because I'm so horrible on air with some of my opinions. But I remember when I first came to Finland, I was never approached by any men, but I was certainly approached by a good few women. And
exotic.
Because I was
Were you exotic?
Well, hopefully not with an American accent, but but to come, we try not to be frivolous here, because this is a serious subject.
Sorry.
I should know. It's but there is this thing in Finland, and I think it was Jalal, you're here as well, that yes, foreign men, albeit with any kind of passport in their pocket, are considered by a lot of people to be exotic and sort of free game.
Over-sexualized.
Do you agree with me?
Yes. Well,
Sorry, I'm
this
laughing.
is.
I'm just
I don't know
imagining.
how it is now, but that early years, it was like this, and there was a reputation.
So
and,
Jalal, have you been treated like a slut because of your origin?
I just before we start the program, I just told to David that I was kicked in the middle of my legs by a lady who was angry at me that I didn't say yes to
her suggestions or advances.
Yeah.
Whoa.
And then there was this girl who came to the kitchen of my restaurant to kiss me, and I stopped her, and again she was angry and slapped me to the face.
Wow.
And how is that possible that you say no?
And I can remember when I was singing in a band once in central Finland in a restaurant in the centre of Jyväskylä, and after a few songs this young lady came up to me and started kissing me and wouldn't let go, and I said, sorry dear, I have to sing here, and I want to sing rather, and the security had to come and take this lady away. And then I can also recall once when I was DJing in a club in Tampere, a guy who pestered me, said, come home with me now, and I said, I'm working, I can't come home with you now, no, and I wouldn't want to come home with you anyway. So yes, I've got quite a catalogue, and I think we all have quite a catalogue of episodes, not to mention the ones that I could say that I had in a certain place of work not too many years ago.
But I wanted to ask if this is really sexual harassment in a public place.
I think
So,
it is. It's absolutely, yes.
absolutely.
Yes.
By anger, that kick is not a kind of sexual thing.
No, but
It is an
it's just
assault.
anger.
It's a
in law.
punishment. It's a punishment for you not being sexual when you have been defined to be sexual by the other. Then it's a punishment for not following, that you are not following the definition of you that the other one is imposing on you. And that's not something women are experience a lot, very often, that being like,
Yes.
yeah, don't be such a bitch just
Yeah,
because you don't
yeah.
want to go home with them, you know?
Yeah,
Or-
and
or
I've
things
seen
like
this.
this.
I've seen this I've witnessed attacks of sexual harassment in Finland by men on women members of staff, and I've been so disgusted. Because at the minute that a boss does that, then his opinion in my mind is just shattered completely. I just couldn't believe it. Of course, I can't name on the air here because for obvious reasons, but I could name names.
Yeah, and then when it comes to the male sexuality again, that male and female sexuality is conditioned differently. That men are expected to be aggressive, always wanting to always be ready for sex for anyone. And women are supposed to be chased by men, sort of, and women are supposed to kind of protect their sexuality and not want it so much, so they have to be seduced and
Yes,
And this was the culture. Nana, I mean, I was brought up in the UK, and this is how it was through the so-called swinging 60s. It was very much the woman will be on the receiving end of this great swinging revolution, and will dress up, to use the word you used, dress up like a, and I'm using the word you use, slut, in order to appeal to the man. But today I see it works both ways as well.
Yeah, but what I mean there, that it works as a disadvantage for men in the sense that if they're not living up to this, because then women can expect them to always be sexual when the woman kind of defines him that way. So the man has no say because he's defined by his sex, like this way of
macho feeling, you know, that I am the man, I'm going to go out on the prowl tonight, I'm going out to hunt, I'm the lion going after the lioness.
Yeah, I mean, so it's disadvantages for males too, even if it's usually considered that this discourse or this idea about female and male sexuality is kind of mostly disadvantages for women, but it has a backside for men too, that men are ashamed for a failing potence or a too early ejaculation and such, because they are supposed to be so, you know, the one who is doing all the job in this whole scenario, you know. So it has backsides, even if it's kind of the aggressions.
And in a way,
more directed
and in a way,
women.
those things that you mentioned, what do actually happen, they do happen because men are, so we say, conditioned to think that they will always succeed in the bedroom.
But they have the obligation.
They have the obligation. It's got to work or else.
Yeah. I mean, if you internalize this idea, of course, because I mean, people, even if it's in society or societally, it's there. This discourse is there. We can identify it. It doesn't mean that each and every one is really directed by this, but of course, it's part of our cultural understanding of sexuality.
Yes, and it manifests itself in films, particularly. Films, I remember this as a teenager in the UK, that the idea was no sex, please, but we can always laugh about it. Say the word tit and everyone laughs. Mention the word cock and everyone laughs, but it's all going to be done behind closed doors. Well, those days, of course, have gone, but that was the atmosphere. The repression of back in those days has been like sort of a genie in a bottle.
Yeah, you have lived through that time.
Yes.
Branko and me, we are so young, so we haven't lived through the sexual revolution. We just heard about it and think like, what the hell are they making a fuss about?
This is a good point to to have this discussion all the time going on, because the values, the culture is changing, and the things that today we are considering it that is not, it is a sexual harassment, probably tomorrow is not sexual harassment. Like back in the history, about 50 years ago, women were not allowed to show a lot of their body, so it had to be covered.
Correct.
And so any man could see any part of the women body, probably could claim that's sexual harassment to me. But today they are allowed to show even their breasts, and so that's not sexual harassment to the man.
And it's young men that cover themselves up with hoodies, for example.
Yeah, no,
But you have to
know
be-
what I mean. That
But you have to be kind of clear in the sense that sexual harassment it includes an element of intimidation, and you can't
Yes.
say that showing your tits, like, it's not intimidating the same way as jerking off out, like in public. Somehow the element of intimidation, of course it can be quite, I mean, somebody can be disgusted, and of course if somebody comes and puts her tits in your face and you don't want it, it must be quite disgusting.
in a
And
state you
had
show
that
your
happen to me.
manhood in a public places.
Sorry, I'm laughing. It's not fun,
That's a
actually.
crime in United States. But in
To do what?
Finland, to show your manhood in a public place.
Manhood.
So whatever
Your
we
dick.
call it. No, well, you can call it that. But in Finland, people come out to the public sauna and see it freely, and everybody can see their
And it's
body.
a very non-sexual thing.
Yeah. So what I
sure?
mean that something in there is very sexual. In here is not, as you said, not that
Yeah.
sexual. So who can also again make a line here? What is intimate and what is not intimate?
I
That's
think,
difficult.
don't you think that really the bottom line for this is simple? It is non-consensual. Non-consensual. If someone makes an approach to you and says, in every way they phrase it, if you say no, that's it, and
Yeah.
end of subject.
Yeah.
And also, I'm afraid it's the end of program, because we've come almost to the end of this edition of.
You have to draw the line.
I'll have to draw the line of this edition. Well, thank you, and thank you very much for all of your insights into this subject, which will not be going away in the near future. Neither will we be going away, because we hope to be back with you. I'd like to thank my guests, Nana Blomqvist, who with her splendid contribution there, also from Branko, who's a student at Åbo Academy, and for your experiences, Jalal, who makes it all possible here in Kasviskeidas. And this has been your host, David Mawby, welcoming you back to this program, Conversation Oasis, at the very same times next week. Until then, bye-bye. Look after yourselves.